You idiot! You bought the house and the car while we were married, which means it's marital property." Her husband and mother-in-law cackled in court, but as soon as the judge began to speak, their laughter died abruptly. "Hello, everyone. Make yourselves comfortable. Grab a cup of tea or coffee, maybe even your knitting. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling today. Have you subscribed to our channel and hit that like button? We've got a fascinating story for you, so happy listening. My name is Grace, and at 37, I finally understood what it meant to be truly free. Not in the sense that I'd been a prisoner, no. It's just that for years, I'd been building my career as a software engineer, climbing the corporate ladder, and only now could I proudly say, I did it all myself. On a Monday morning, I sat in my office on the 12th floor of a downtown San Francisco high-rise, sipping coffee from my favorite mug emblazoned with Top Developer of the Year. I'd received this award 3 months ago at our IT company's corporate event. Outside my window, the city sprawled below, and on my desk lay a contract to develop software for a major national bank. The contract sum would make most people gasp $1.2 million. "Grace, you're a genius," exclaimed my assistant Emily, looking over the technical specifications. "How do you even manage to find these loopholes in security systems?" "Experience, darling," I chuckled, signing the documents. 5 years in programming taught me to think like a hacker but work like a professional. Apex Cyber Solutions was my baby. I founded it 5 years ago when I realized I didn't want to work for someone else anymore. I started with just one programmer myself. Now I have 23 specialists on staff. We specialized in creating security systems for banks and large corporations. My personal income last year was $2 million, not bad for a girl from a small town in Ohio who once wrote term papers for $20. That evening, I was driving home in my white BMW X3, listening to the news on the radio. My phone rang. My husband's name flashed on the screen. "Hey, sunshine," came Daniel's familiar voice. "How was work?" "Excellent. Signed that big bank contract. We can definitely afford that trip to the Caribbean now." I laughed. "You're an amazing woman, Grace. I'm so proud of you." Daniel worked as a sales manager at a car dealership. He earned a decent living, though not as much as I did, but that had never been an issue in our relationship. We met 3 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. He immediately attracted me with his sincerity and sense of humor. We got married a year later, a modest but beautiful wedding. "So what did your mom say about dinner on Saturday?" I asked, slowing down for a red light. "She's thrilled. Already planning the menu. You know how much she loves to cook for us." Susan Miller, my mother-in-law, was indeed a wonderful woman. She worked as a senior accountant at a construction company and had raised Daniel on her own after divorcing his father. When we first met, I'd braced myself for the classic mother-in-law problems, but Susan had welcomed me like her own daughter. "Daniel is so happy with you," she'd once told me over tea. "I can see how he glows, and the fact that you're successful only makes me happier. It means my son chose a smart woman." We lived in a 3-bedroom condo in a good neighborhood. I'd bought it before we were married with my first significant earnings from my business. Daniel moved in with me after the wedding. The condo was stylish and modern, but not huge. After the successful bank contract, I started thinking about something bigger. On Wednesday evening, I visited my father. George Stevens lived in his own house on the outskirts of the city, small but cozy, with a garden and a greenhouse. He was a retired civil engineer who had designed bridges and buildings his whole life. After my mother passed away 7 years ago, Dad had withdrawn into himself, but gradually learned to live again. "Dad, what do you think about a house in the suburbs?" I asked, helping him water tomatoes in the greenhouse. "You mean like a vacation home?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "No, a real house where we could live year-round. Business is going well, and I want something of our own, you know." Dad looked at me intently. His eyes always held the wisdom of a man who had seen life. "A house is a good investment, Gracie. Land never loses its value, and you've reached a level where you can afford it. Just buy smart." "What do you mean?" "Study the documents carefully. The property should be free of liens. The house needs proper utilities. And one more thing." He paused, picking a ripe tomato. "What else, Dad?" Life is unpredictable, honey. You never know what will happen tomorrow, so you always need to think ahead. On Saturday, Daniel and I went to look at houses in an upscale development called Willow Creek Estates. I'd found a few options online, but wanted to see them in person. Daniel was thrilled with the idea. "Imagine the life we'll have," he said, looking at photos on the realtor's website. "Our own house, a garage, maybe we'll even build a pool, as long as there's good internet." I laughed. "Otherwise, how will I work?" The development was a 40-minute drive from downtown. It had security, well-maintained roads, and each lot was about half an acre. The realtor, a young woman named Catherine, showed us 5 houses, but one of them immediately captured my heart. It was a 2-story red brick house with large windows and a porch. The lot had mature pine trees and a small pond with a decorative bridge. Inside, there were 5 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and a spacious, open-plan kitchen and living area. The garage could fit 2 cars. "This is perfect." Daniel walked from room to room, not hiding his admiration. "The price is steep," I said thoughtfully. $4 million, see? But we have the money. After your latest contract, we can afford it. I really could buy this house. I had enough in my accounts, plus I could take some money out of the business. But something made me cautious. "Show me the documents for the house," I asked Catherine. We spent 2 hours at the realtor's office. I studied every piece of paper, checked every certificate. The house was clean with no debts or encumbrances. The lot was owned outright and all utilities were officially connected. "You're a very thorough buyer." Catherine smiled. "That's good. Many people buy without looking and then have problems." "I'm a programmer," I explained. "It's an occupational hazard to double-check everything." That evening at home, we discussed the purchase over dinner. Daniel was full of enthusiasm. "This is our dream, Grace. Our own house where we'll raise kids, entertain friends. You work so hard you deserve a beautiful life." "But it's a very serious expense," I countered. "Almost all my savings will go into it." "But look at your prospects. The business is growing. Contracts are getting bigger and the house will only appreciate in value." On Sunday, I went to see my father again. I told him about the house and showed him pictures. "Beautiful house, eh?" He nodded. "Did you check the documents?" "Of course, everything's clean." "Good. And whose name will it be in?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't really thought about it. "Mine, I guess." "Why?" Dad took off his glasses and wiped them with a cloth, his characteristic gesture when he was contemplating something important. "Gracie, you know I love you very much and I respect Daniel. He's a good guy, but life is complicated." "What are you trying to say?" "The house is big, expensive, a temptation for many. And family law, well, you understand." I understood what he was getting at. Marital property in case of divorce is divided equally. But what divorce could there be? Daniel and I loved each other. "Dad, do you suspect something?" "I don't suspect anything. I'm just an old engineer who's used to calculating risks." "Want my advice?" "Of course. Register the house in my name. Later, if necessary, we can transfer it to you or you'll inherit it. For now, let it be a safety net." My father's suggestion seemed reasonable. Not that I didn't trust Daniel, but you never know what life might bring. And Dad was right. One should think ahead. A week later, I met with Catherine and announced my decision. "We're buying it, but we'll register it in my father's name." "No problem." The realtor nodded. "We'll need his documents and a power of attorney from you to conduct negotiations." Daniel was pleased with my decision. "That's a great idea," he said. "Your father is a wise man. There are probably some tax benefits for seniors." I didn't correct him. The most important thing was that he didn't object to this arrangement. The buying process took a month. I transferred the money and Dad signed all the documents. Formally, the house belonged to George Stevens, but in reality, it was our family home. I also decided to buy a new car. My BMW X3 was good, but I wanted something more representative. I'd set my sights on a beautiful black Lexus RX, the latest model, priced $90,000. "Do you really need such an expensive car?" Daniel asked, surprised. "Your BMW is still practically new." "Honey, I have serious clients now. Image is important, and I'll give the BMW to you. Your Toyota is getting old." I also registered the car in my father's name following the same logic you never know. Daniel didn't object again. He was even happy to get my BMW. At the end of September, we moved into the house. It was a real event. Susan came to help us settle in. She walked around the house in awe. "You're amazing, Gracie," she said, admiring the spacious kitchen. "You've created such a home. Daniel is lucky to have met you." We threw a housewarming party, inviting friends, colleagues, and relatives. Dad was the guest of honor as he was formally the owner. He was embarrassed when guests thanked him for his hospitality. "What kind of host am I?" He'd wave dismissively. "This is all Grace's doing." That evening, when everyone had left, Daniel and I sat on the patio enjoying the peace and fresh air. "You know what I'm thinking about?" my husband said, hugging me. "What? About kids. A house like this needs kids. Imagine how great it will be for them to run around the garden swing on the swings by the pond." I snuggled closer to him. "Yes, kids." We had talked about it for a long time, but kept putting it off. First I was building my business, then we were buying the house. Maybe it's time. "Well, let's try," I whispered in his ear. The following months were like a fairy tale. We lived in a beautiful house, entertained guests, and planned for the future. I continued to work successfully, securing several more large contracts. Daniel got a promotion at the dealership, becoming a senior manager. Susan often came to visit, helping with the household chores. In November, we had a big party for my 38th birthday, a respectable age for a successful woman. Friends gave me beautiful jewelry colleagues, a spa gift certificate, and Dad a rare programming book. "To our birthday girl," Daniel toasted. "To the smartest, most beautiful, and successful woman in the world, for making our lives wonderful." Everyone raised their glasses. I looked at those happy faces and thought, this is true happiness. A loving husband, a wonderful mother-in-law, loyal friends, a beautiful home, a successful business. What more could one wish for? At the holiday table, Susan told the guests about our plans. "They want children," she said proudly. "Imagine how wonderful it will be to have grandchildren growing up in such a house. And I'll be a doting grandmother spoiling them and teaching them about life." "Mom, don't rush things," Daniel laughed. "It will all happen in due time. But time waits for no one," Susan retorted. "Grace is already 38. We need to hurry up with the heirs." After the guests left, we cleaned up the dishes and talked about our winter plans. "Maybe we should go on vacation," Daniel suggested, "to the Caribbean or maybe a ski trip to Colorado relax before the New Year holidays." "Good idea," I agreed, "but I have a lot of work, 2 new projects at once." "You work too much, sunshine. You need to relax sometimes." In December, we did fly to the Caribbean for 10 days. We stayed at a 5-star resort, went snorkeling, had massages, and enjoyed exotic cuisine. Daniel was attentive and caring, constantly taking pictures of me against palm trees and the ocean. "You're so beautiful," he'd say, kissing me at sunset. "I'm the happiest man in the world." We celebrated New Year's Eve at home in our new house. We invited our closest family and friends, Dad, Susan, and a few others. I prepared a festive dinner and set the table in the large living room. Snow was falling outside the windows, logs crackled in the fireplace, and colorful lights twinkled on the Christmas tree. "To new achievements," Dad toasted at midnight. "May our dreams come true and may our loved ones be healthy and happy." "To family," Susan added. "May this house always be filled with children's laughter." "To love," Daniel said, looking into my eyes. I felt completely happy needed. Everything in my life was right: a successful business, a beautiful home, a loving family. What else did one need for complete happiness? In January, I found out I was pregnant. The test showed 2 lines, and I almost jumped for joy. When Daniel heard the news, he picked me up, spun me around the room, and shouted, "We're going to be parents! We're having a baby!" When Susan found out about the pregnancy, she cried tears of joy. "Finally!" she sobbed. "I thought I'd never live to see grandchildren." Dad was also happy, but in his own reserved way. "Congratulations, honey. Children are a great responsibility and a great happiness." The first few months of pregnancy went wonderfully. I had almost no morning sickness. I continued to work, just reducing my hours slightly. Daniel surrounded me with care, carried me in his arms, and didn't let me lift anything heavy. We started preparing the nursery, choosing the brightest room with south-facing windows. Daniel built shelves for toys with his own hands. I ordered beautiful, neutral-colored furniture since we didn't know the baby's gender yet. "It's so good we have such a big house," Daniel said, painting the nursery walls. "The baby will have plenty of room to roam." "Yes, we did the right thing buying this house," I agreed, stroking my barely noticeable belly. Life was beautiful. I managed a successful company, lived in a beautiful home, and was expecting a child with the man I loved. I had the support of my family, loyal friends, and financial stability. It seemed like it would always be this way. But life, as Dad used to say, is unpredictable, and sometimes it throws such surprises at you that it's impossible to prepare for them in advance. I first noticed changes in Daniel's behavior in March when I was 5 months pregnant. At first, they were minor things. He started staying late at work, more often citing new responsibilities as a senior manager. "You'll be late again," I asked, when he called at 7 p.m. one evening. "Sunshine, we're swamped right now. A new shipment of cars came in and everything needs to be processed. Don't wait up for me. Have dinner without me." Initially, I didn't think much of it. In business, there are periods when you have to work a lot. I often stayed late myself when project deadlines were looming. But gradually, the oddities increased. Daniel began to answer my questions distractedly, as if he were thinking about something else. When his phone rang, he would go into another room and speak in a hushed voice. When I asked, he'd say he was discussing work matters with colleagues. "You've become somewhat distant," I told him at breakfast. "You're always daydreaming." "Just thinking about the future," he replied, not looking up from his phone, "about how we'll live when the baby is born." Daniel also started dressing differently. He used to prefer calm tones and classic styles. Now he was buying expensive, brightly colored shirts, trendy jeans, and even got a stylish haircut at a high-end salon. "How do I look?" he asked, admiring himself in the mirror. "The stylist says this look is trending right now." "Since when do you follow fashion trends?" I asked, surprised. "Since I realized that appearance directly affects sales. A respectable manager should look the part." It was logical. There was nothing to argue about. But I was worried not so much by the change itself as by the speed at which it was happening. In April, Susan came to stay with us for a visit. She immediately noticed my concern. "Gracie, you look upset. Is the pregnancy hard on you?" she asked, stirring soup on the stove. "The baby's fine. It's just Daniel has changed." "What exactly is bothering you?" I shared my observations with her. Susan listened attentively, nodding understandingly from time to time. "You know, dear," she said thoughtfully, "men sometimes react strangely to their wife's pregnancy. They start to realize the increased responsibility, worry about the upcoming changes. Maybe Daniel is just worried about how he'll cope with being a father and head of the family. But we're doing well, our income is stable, we have a good home. It's not about the material situation, sweetie. It's about male psychology. It's important for him to feel like the pillar of the family. And here you are earning more than him. It might be hurting his pride." My mother-in-law's explanation seemed reasonable. Indeed, many men are sensitive about their wife's financial superiority. Maybe Daniel was just trying to assert himself and prove his worth. "What would you advise? Be patient with him. Encourage him, praise his successes, let him feel his importance. As for work time, we'll put everything in its place." I decided to follow my mother-in-law's wise advice. I started taking more interest in Daniel's career achievements, praising him for his professional victories, and not reproaching him for returning late. However, the situation not only didn't improve, but noticeably worsened. In May, Daniel made new friends. He met them at the fitness club he'd joined after work. Marcus and Oliver, both single, both considered themselves life experts. "Great guys," Daniel would say, returning from another workout. Marcus is especially cool, achieved everything on his own, drives a prestigious car, rents a fancy apartment, lives large. "That's nice," I replied without much enthusiasm. "And what does this successful man do?" "He's in business, trading investments, various projects, says money should work for you, not you for it." Quite philosophical. And the second friend, is he also a businessman? Oliver works at a bank, a loan consultant, also earns well. They both understand what financial independence means. These new life gurus started appearing at our house regularly, first occasionally, then more and more often. From the first glance, I disliked them intensely. Marcus was tall and athletic with an arrogant gaze and a habit of assessing his surroundings through the lens of material gain. Oliver was thin and nervous with restless eyes and a habit of constantly calculating something in his head. Impressive house, Marcus remarked on his first visit, looking around the spacious living room. Must have cost a pretty penny. Around $4 million, Daniel replied proudly, not noticing my disapproving look. Solid investment, and the lot isn't small. Daniel, you're smart for choosing such a promising partner. In our time, success is a relative concept. Oliver interjected with a knowing look. The main thing is to be able to preserve and multiply it. After they left, I tried to discuss my husband's new acquaintances with him. I don't really like your friends. Why, they're perfectly normal people. That Marcus looks at our house like a real estate agent, and the other one gives the impression of someone with unhealthy ambitions. You're exaggerating. They just have life experience and assess reality soberly. Soberly or mercenarily. Grace, these are my friends, and I have no intention of stopping my association with them because of your baseless suspicions. This was our first serious argument in months. Daniel demonstratively went into his study and avoided talking to me for the rest of the evening. The new friends were clearly having a strong influence on my husband. He began to express opinions that were previously uncharacteristic of him. Are you aware that more than half of modern marriages end in divorce? He casually threw out at dinner one day. Why such a depressing statistic all of a sudden, I wondered. Marcus was telling me. He claims people have become more demanding in relationships, unwilling to compromise. And what's the point of this information? Nothing special, just an interesting fact about modern society. However, such interesting facts became more frequent about the mechanisms of property divisions and divorce, about the complexities of living together for people with different financial statuses, about how people often marry for selfish reasons. Lately, you've been saying some strange things, I told him one day. Are your new friends influencing you that much? They just help me look at life from a different angle. What angle is that? Daniel paused for a moment. Well, for example, they make me think about the fact that I live in a house bought with your money, use a car you provided me. Essentially, I'm dependent on you. What nonsense. We're married. We have a shared household. Shared, yes. But whose name are the documents in? The question caught me off guard. Formally, everything was registered in my father's name, but Daniel didn't know that. He thought I was the owner. Mine, of course, but it's our family property. Ours or yours? I felt a surge of irritation. Daniel, what's wrong with you? You're talking like a paranoid. I'm talking like an adult who has started to analyze his position in the family. In June, the situation escalated to a breaking point. Daniel spent almost every evening with his new friends in restaurants, entertainment venues, or at their places. He would return home after midnight, often tipsy and aggressive. Where have you been? I asked, when he returned at 1:30 a.m., socializing with friends, discussing prospects. What prospects? You have a pregnant wife waiting at home and you're out having fun. Don't raise your voice at me. I have every right to my personal time. Personal time? You're a married man, soon to be a father. Yes, married to a woman who thinks she acquired me along with the real estate. Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. I couldn't believe my husband was capable of such a statement. Where did you get such ideas? From real-life grace? From understanding that I've turned into a kept pet fully provided for? You've completely lost your mind. We love each other. We're expecting a baby. Love, or do you keep me for loyalty and obedience? I ran out of the room and locked myself in the bedroom. For the first time during my pregnancy, tears flowed genuinely, not from hormonal swings or fatigue, but from deep emotional pain. The next morning, Daniel apologized. I'm sorry I went too far, had too much to drink, said a bunch of nonsense. But you really think that, don't you? Of course not. It's just that sometimes it's hard for men to accept their wife's superiority in financial matters. It hurts their pride. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But an inner voice warned me, this is just the beginning of big problems. In July, Susan visited us again, and her behavior had also changed noticeably. Before she was warm and sincere. Now there was a certain calculation in her words and actions. "Grace, tell me, what's the approximate value of your house?" she inquired casually while we were preparing lunch. "Around $4 million. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just curious. The car isn't cheap either. Probably cost around $90,000. But why these questions?" Susan paused as if considering her wording. "You see, dear, I recently watched a program about family law. A specialist there explained in detail how property is divided in case of divorce. Very informative." "What divorce?" I became alarmed. "Oh, no reason to worry, of course. Just general knowledge doesn't hurt. You never know what situations life might bring." "Susan, what are you talking about?" "Daniel and I get along perfectly well." Of course. I mean purely theoretical aspects. But you know what's interesting? It turns out that all property acquired by spouses during marriage is automatically considered jointly acquired, no matter who actually bought it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Had my mother-in-law also fallen under the bad influence of her son's advisors? What does that mean? It means that in case of, God forbid, a divorce, both the house and the car would be subject to equal division even if you acquired them solely with your own money. But I bought them for our family. Of course, dear, but the law is the law. It doesn't consider noble motives, only legal facts. That evening, I felt extremely uneasy. It seemed like some kind of conspiracy was forming around me, and even my mother-in-law, whom I considered an ally, was among the potential adversaries. In August, another major argument occurred. Daniel came home around midnight, and I was waiting for him in the living room. "We need to talk seriously," I declared. "About what exactly? About what's happening to our marriage. You've become a completely different person. I've become more mature, started to understand certain things." "What things specifically?" Daniel sat down opposite me and looked me straight in the eye. "Grace, let's be honest. Did you really marry me for love?" "Of course, didn't you?" "I thought so too. But now I understand you needed a convenient husband, not too ambitious, not interfering with your plans. That's utter nonsense. Not nonsense at all. You never consulted me on important decisions. You bought the house without discussion, the car too. For you, I'm just a decorative element." "Daniel, you're talking absurdities. All of this was done for our common good." "For ours." "Then why is everything registered only in your name? Because the money was mine." "Exactly. My money, not ours. That explains a lot." I realized the discussion had reached a dead end. Someone had thoroughly brainwashed Daniel, and it was practically impossible to change his mind. "And what do you propose?" "I propose a fair game. Re-register the house and car in our joint names 50-50. "For what purpose?" "So that I feel like an equal participant in family relations, not a freeloader. And if I don't agree—" Daniel fell silent, then sighed heavily. "Then I'll be forced to conclude that you don't trust me, and a marriage without trust is a sham." In September, our son Ethan was born. The baby arrived healthy and strong. The delivery was without complications. The child ate and slept well. It seemed this joyous event should have reconciled our family. For the first few weeks, Daniel was indeed a caring father. He rocked Ethan, changed diapers, and helped me at night. Susan moved in with us for a few weeks to help with the newborn. "What a wonderful baby," she cooed, cradling her grandson, the spitting image of his father just as handsome. But within a week, Daniel resumed meeting with his friends. Now he had a new excuse. "I need to be more serious about earning. We have a child now. Responsibility has increased." "But we're not in need," I objected, feeding Ethan. "My income covers all expenses." Again, my income. Where is our income? Conflicts became daily. Daniel nitpicked at every little thing, reproached me for selfishness and unwillingness to consider his opinion. I felt guilty, although I understood I had no real guilt. In October, an event occurred that finally opened my eyes to the true situation. I accidentally overheard Daniel's phone conversation with one of his friends. "Yeah, everything's going according to plan," he said, pacing the patio. "She's already nervous, senses something's wrong. Naturally, she'll resist. Marcus advises not to rush to prepare her psychologically, gradually. Yes, Mom's in on it, fully supportive." And I stood in the hallway with the baby in my arms, unable to believe my ears. So a real conspiracy had been organized against me, and my own mother-in-law was participating in it. That evening, I decided to take the bull by the horns. I get the impression you're discussing our personal problems with someone. And isn't it okay to consult with friends? Consult, yes, but to make plans against your own wife, no. Daniel turned noticeably pale. "What are you talking about?" "I heard your conversation about the plan and about how I need to be psychologically prepared." He was silent for a few moments, then flared up. "Yes, that's right. I'm tired of being a kept man. Tired of you treating me like a pet. I never treated you like that." "Oh, yes, you did. That's why you registered the property only in your name. That's why you make decisions unilaterally. Daniel, it was all your new friends who put these ideas in your head." "My friends just helped me understand my own situation. And what are you trying to achieve?" "I'm seeking justice. Re-register the property and the car in both our names, or I'm filing for divorce." The ultimatum was final and irrevocable. I realized the childish games were over. A real fight had begun. "File away," I replied coldly. "I'm interested to see the outcome." In November, Daniel indeed went to court with a divorce petition. A few days later, I received a court summons regarding the division of jointly acquired property. Studying the claims, I could barely suppress my laughter. Daniel was demanding half the value of the house and half the value of the car as his legal right to marital property. His lawyer colorfully described how the defendant me had acquired expensive assets during the marriage using income from entrepreneurial activities, which were also conducted during the marriage. The document was legally flawless. If the house and car had indeed belonged to me, Daniel would have been guaranteed his half. But the actual owner was my father. I called Dad and told him the news. It started. Daniel filed for divorce and is claiming half the property. "Well, well," Dad responded calmly. "It seems my precaution wasn't in vain. You'll need a lawyer." "I think so, though it seems pretty straightforward here." "Better to be safe. I know a sharp family lawyer, Arthur Vance. We'll go see him for a consultation tomorrow." In December, the preliminary court hearing took place. Daniel arrived accompanied by his lawyer and Susan. Seeing me, my former mother-in-law put on a friendly smile, but her eyes conveyed entirely different emotions. "Gracie dear, why such extremes?" she addressed me. "Can't we resolve this amicably?" "What do you mean?" "Well, Daniel isn't a greedy man. He would have agreed to a third instead of half just to avoid court battles and scandals." I looked at this woman in amazement. Did she seriously expect me to fall for such a primitive bargain? "Susan, are you aware of the legal details of our property?" "Of course, everything was bought by you during the marriage, so it's subject to division." "We'll see," I replied calmly. Daniel's lawyer, a young, self-assured man named Kevin Andrews, tried to persuade me to a settlement. "Ms. Stevens, let's resolve this without unnecessary fuss. My client is willing to compromise. 25% of the total property value, and we part ways without mutual claims. And if I refuse, then in court we will demand the legal 50%. And honestly, our chances of winning are close to 100%. The property was acquired during the marriage, therefore it is jointly owned." "We'll see," I shrugged indifferently. After the preliminary hearing, Dad, our lawyer Arthur, and I went to a cafe near the courthouse. "Arthur, what are their real prospects?" I inquired. "Under normal circumstances, excellent," the silver-haired lawyer replied. "The property was indeed acquired during the marriage. However, there's a significant nuance: it's not registered to either spouse." "And what does that mean in practice?" "It means that legally your father is the owner, and what doesn't belong to the married couple cannot be subject to division upon divorce. So Daniel gets nothing." More precisely, there's simply nothing to divide. The house and car are not part of the couple's marital property. Dad smiled with satisfaction. So my intuition didn't fail me. But they don't suspect this, do they? I clarified. Judging by their behavior and demands, they have no idea. They're convinced the property belongs to you and are preparing for an easy victory. Well, what a surprise awaits them. I couldn't help but smirk. All that remained was to wait for the main court hearing where the whole truth would be revealed. Daniel and his allies were fully confident that they were about to receive a multi-million-dollar windfall. They had no idea what a blow awaited them. I eagerly awaited that moment. I had endured too much pain and humiliation in recent months. Now it was time for payback. Preparing for court took almost a month. Arthur Vance meticulously studied all the documents, collected certificates, and prepared a defense strategy. Although the outcome of the case was predetermined, he insisted on full legal preparation. There are no trifles in court, he explained, sorting through papers in his office. One inaccuracy can nullify all our advantages. I watched his work with growing admiration. The silver-haired lawyer with 30 years of experience knew his job perfectly. Every document was examined under a microscope, every wording fine-tuned to the last comma. They definitely don't know whose name the property is in right? I asked again. Judging by their claims, they have no idea. Otherwise, they wouldn't be demanding the division of property that doesn't belong to them. Meanwhile, Daniel and his team were preparing for the upcoming battle with the enthusiasm of hunters who already see their prey in the crosshairs. His lawyer, Kevin Andrews, was practically glowing with anticipation of an easy victory. A week before the trial, Susan came to my house. She arrived unannounced with a serious face and a folder of documents in her hands. "Gracie, I need to talk to you seriously," she announced, walking into the living room. "I'm listening." "I've brought calculations of the property value. The house and car, that's about $4.1 million. Half is roughly $2.05 million, but Daniel is willing to take only $1.5 million just to avoid lengthy court proceedings." I looked with interest at the papers she brought, property appraisals, market value certificates for the car, even some calculations of future legal costs. "Very thorough." I nodded. "It's clear you've prepared seriously." "Of course we prepared. Daniel has a legal right to his share, but he's a reasonable man. He doesn't want to drag things out. And if I don't agree to this $1.5 million, Susan smirked, like someone holding all the trump cards, "then in court, we'll demand the full $2.05 million, and we'll get it rest assured. The law is on our side." Such confidence. "My dear, I wasn't born yesterday. All property was bought during the marriage, so it's jointly owned. There's nothing to even argue about." After she left, I called Dad and told him about the visit. "They're so confident of victory, they're even offering a discount." I laughed. $1.5 million instead of over $2 million. Generous of them. "Indeed," Dad commented dryly. "I wonder what their faces will look like when the truth comes out." "Dad, do you regret having to resort to such a trick?" George paused. "You know, Gracie, life has taught me not to regret precautions. If I hadn't insisted on this arrangement, you really would have lost half of your honestly earned property now. So you saw through Daniel right away." "Not right away, but something about him bothered me. He was too interested in your income, too often asked about the cost of purchases. And when those new friends of his appeared, all doubts vanished." 3 days before the trial, Daniel made a final attempt to persuade me to a settlement. He came late in the evening as I was putting Ethan to bed. "Grace, let's talk like civilized people." He began, sitting in an armchair. "What's there to talk about? I think everything's already been said. Listen, I don't want to drag this into a public scandal. The child is growing up. Why should he know his parents sued each other over money? Very touching concern for your son. Where was it when you were planning the divorce?" "I wasn't planning it. Circumstances just developed so that there was no other way out." "What circumstances? The fact that your new friends convinced you I was using you." Daniel winced. "It's not about friends. It's about me realizing my true position in this family." "And what is it?" "I realized I live on your money, in your house, drive your car. Essentially, I'm a kept man." "Daniel, we're spouses. We have a shared household." "Shared." He laughed bitterly. Then why is everything registered only in your name? I almost choked. He still thought I was the owner. All right, I said. Let's assume you're right. What do you propose? I propose a fair division. You get the house, I get monetary compensation, say $1 million, and we part ways without claims. And why $1 million specifically? Because I'm not greedy. I can take $1,000 just to avoid court. Amazing how quickly the price had dropped from $1.5 million to $800,000. Apparently Daniel was really afraid of a public dispute. No, I replied calmly. See you in court. Daniel's face contorted with anger. You're being stubborn for nothing. You'll have to give up much more in court. We'll see. The night before the court hearing, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, the outcome was predetermined. I was simply anticipating the moment when the masks would be dropped and everyone would see their true faces. In the morning, I dressed carefully, a stern black suit, minimal jewelry hair pulled back in an elegant bun. I wanted to look serious and dignified. Dad picked me up early. He was also in a solemn mood. Ready for the show? He smiled. More than ready. I wonder what Daniel will say when he finds out the truth. I imagine it won't be too pleasant. The courthouse met us with its usual hustle and bustle, lawyers with briefcases, plaintiffs and defendants with documents, witnesses and relatives. The air buzzed with the tension of impending decisions. I saw Daniel and his team from afar. They were standing in the hall, animatedly discussing something. Susan was dressed to the nines, an expensive suit, jewelry, and elaborate hairstyle. Lawyer Kevin Andrews was shuffling papers with the air of a general before a decisive battle. Look how pleased they are, Dad said quietly, already dividing the money. They're celebrating too soon, I smirked. Marcus and Oliver, Daniel's friends, had also come to the hearing, apparently wanting to witness their friend's triumph personally. They stood at a distance, talking and glancing in my direction. Are those two the masterminds? Dad asked. Yes, the architects of this whole mess. We entered the courtroom exactly at the appointed time. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a stern face and attentive eyes, was already at her bench. The clerk was preparing the minutes. Everything exuded formality and the inevitability of the law. Daniel, his lawyer, and Susan sat at the plaintiff's table. They looked confident, even slightly relaxed, like people who had come for what already belonged to them. Dad Arthur Vance and I took the defendant's seats. Dad was calm as always. Our lawyer methodically arranged his documents. All rise, the bailiff announced. Court is now in session. Judge Elizabeth Warner began the session with formalities, read out the essence of the claim, introduced the parties, and announced the plaintiff's demands. The plaintiff, Daniel Miller, demands the division of jointly acquired marital property, namely a residential house with a total area of approximately 2,500 square feet, located in the Willow Creek Estates development, and a Lexus RX automobile. The total value of the disputed property is estimated at $4.1 million. Kevin Andrews rose to present the plaintiff's position. The young lawyer spoke confidently and assertively, gesturing with documents. Your Honor, the case is perfectly clear. The disputed property was acquired by the defendant during her marriage to my client. According to our state's marital property laws, all property acquired by spouses during marriage is their joint property. Consequently, my client has a legal right to half the value of said property, that is approximately $2.05 million. The courtroom was quiet. Daniel nodded, agreeing with every word of his representative. Susan sat with the triumphant expression of someone already mentally spending the money. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, the defendant attempted to conceal the true value of the property by offering a deliberately low compensation. This indicates the bad faith of her actions. Marcus and Oliver in the back rows exchanged satisfied glances. They were probably already imagining how they would celebrate their protégé's victory. The judge listened to the plaintiff and turned to our side. Counsel for the defendant, you may proceed. Arthur Vance rose slowly. Unlike his young colleague, he spoke measuredly and calmly. Your Honor, the plaintiff's position is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Yes, the disputed property was indeed acquired during the marriage. but there is a significant circumstance that radically changes the legal assessment of the situation. Daniel frowned. Kevin Andrews grew wary. Susan stopped smiling. The fact is, our lawyer continued, that neither the residential house nor the automobile belongs to the defendant. Therefore, they cannot be subject to division upon divorce. A barely audible rustle went through the courtroom. Daniel turned sharply to his lawyer, who looked bewildered. "Your Honor." Kevin Andrews jumped up. "I request clarification on the assertion that the property does not belong to the defendant." At this point, Daniel and Susan looked at each other and suddenly burst out laughing. Their laughter sounded contemptuous and triumphant. "Ha ha 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 ha!" Susan guffawed, pointing a finger at me. "So what if it's in another name? It's still marital property." Yeah, Daniel chimed in, also laughing. "She thinks her little trick will fool us, you idiot." Susan shrieked through her laughter. "You bought the house and car while you were married, so it's marital property, ha ha ha." Daniel roared. "You'll still give up half. The law is the law." Marcus and Oliver in the back rows were also snickering, pleased with their friend's performance. But their laughter died abruptly when the judge began to speak. According to the submitted title documents, the owner of the residential house and the automobile is George Stevens, the defendant's father. The silence in the courtroom became deafening. The laughter froze as if cut off with a knife. Daniel's mouth fell open, but he uttered no sound. Susan turned ashen. The plaintiff's lawyer frantically shuffled through his papers. "How?" Daniel stammered. "Young man," the judge said sternly, "order must be maintained in the courtroom. All questions through your representative." Kevin Andrews requested a recess to examine the documents. For 15 minutes, he sat hunched over the papers our lawyer had provided. Daniel and Susan stood beside him, peering over his shoulder with dumbfounded expressions. Marcus and Oliver in the back rows were no longer laughing. Their triumphant faces had been replaced by complete bewilderment. After the recess, the plaintiff's lawyer was subdued and confused. "Your Honor, without denying Mr. George Stevens' formal ownership, we believe that the property was in fact acquired with the defendant's funds. Therefore, this constitutes a sham transaction aimed at concealing assets from division." Arthur Vance calmly countered, "Esteemed colleague, you are making serious accusations unsupported by evidence. Where are the documents confirming that the money for the purchase belonged to the defendant? Where are the bank statements showing transfers? Where are the loan receipts?" Kevin Andrews was silent. He had no such documents, nor could he. "Moreover," our lawyer continued, "there are documents confirming that Mr. George Stevens is a man of means possessing sufficient funds to acquire the disputed property. He presented statements about Dad's pension, his bank deposits, and the sale of a piece of land last year. The judge carefully examined all the papers. The court establishes the following: the residential house and automobile are registered in the name of George Stevens. No documents confirming the fictitious nature of these transactions have been presented by the plaintiff. Consequently, the disputed property does not belong to the defendant and cannot be considered jointly acquired marital property of the spouses." Daniel sat as if struck by lightning. His face was ashen, his hands trembled. Susan began fanning herself rapidly as if she suddenly felt suffocated. "In view of the foregoing," the judge continued, "the claims for property division are not subject to satisfaction due to the absence of the subject of dispute. Order in the court. Cease this disruption immediately, or you will be removed. And understand finally that property not belonging to the parties in this case cannot be subject to division." Susan slumped onto the table like a punctured balloon. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Their lawyer looked as if he'd been hit over the head with a club. "The court rules," Judge Warner announced solemnly, "to dismiss the claims of Daniel Miller regarding the division of jointly acquired marital property. Court costs are to be borne by the plaintiff." And that was it. The months-long war had ended in a complete rout for the enemy. Daniel didn't get a penny. Moreover, he had to pay the court costs. After the decision was announced, a real drama unfolded in the courthouse corridor. Daniel stood by the window, staring blankly at the street. Susan was crying, smearing mascara down her cheeks. "How could this happen?" she mumbled. "We were so sure." Marcus and Oliver quickly disappeared, not wanting to associate with the losers. So much for a male friendship built on shared, greedy interests. Kevin Andrews tried to explain the legal intricacies to his client. You see, Mr. Miller, we proceeded on the assumption that the property belonged to your ex-wife. If we had known the true owner, how were we supposed to know? Daniel scoffed bitterly. She never said whose name she was registering the purchases in. And you didn't inquire. I thought it went without saying it was hers. Who else? I stood next to Dad and Arthur Vance observing this scene. There was no pity, only fatigue and relief that it was finally over. Grace! Daniel called out. I turned around. He approached, his face contorted with a mixture of anger and despair. You deliberately kept quiet about the property being in your father's name, and you deliberately didn't ask. I replied calmly. But we were husband and wife. There shouldn't be secrets between spouses. Daniel, you chose the divorce yourself. You decided I was using you. You believed your new friends more than your wife. I didn't think you were capable of such deceit. Deceit? Dad interjected, stepping towards us. Deceit is planning a divorce for someone else's money. Deceit is deceiving a pregnant wife. Foresight is wisdom. Daniel looked at my father with hatred. So you planned this all along, even when buying the house? We didn't plan anything, Dad replied. I just know life better than young people do. And I was right. Susan approached us, still sniffling. Gracie, maybe we can still come to an agreement. At least give Daniel something. He is the father of your child. Susan, I said wearily, you yourself said the law is the law. Well, the law has decided. But this isn't fair. And was it fair to plan how to drive me to a breaking point? Was it fair to discuss my personal life with outsiders? My former mother-in-law fell silent, bewildered. Apparently, she hadn't expected me to know about her involvement in the conspiracy. Half an hour later, Dad and I left the courthouse. It was sunny and warm outside. Spring was in full swing and life went on. Well satisfied with the result, Dad asked. You know, Dad, satisfied isn't the word. More like relieved. It was hard living under constant tension. And you don't feel sorry for Daniel. I thought about it. Deep down, there was a faint sadness for the man I once loved. But that Daniel had disappeared, dissolved in greed and calculation. No, I don't feel sorry for him. He made his choice. He believed strangers more than his own wife. He decided money was more important than family. And what will you do now? Live on, raise my son, grow my business. Maybe someday I'll meet a man who loves me, not my bank account. We reached Dad's car. He started the engine and we drove home. On the way, I thought about the past months, about the people who had shown their true colors, about how quickly illusions shatter. Little Ethan was waiting for me at home. The nanny, an elderly, kind woman named Valentina, met us with the baby in her arms. Well, how did it go? She asked. Everything's great. I smiled, taking my son. We stayed in our house. That evening, as I fed Ethan, I thought about the future. A new life lay ahead, without lies, without deceit, without people who saw me only as a source of income. Daniel was granted visitation rights with Ethan on weekends, but after the trial, he never once used them. Apparently, the disappointment from his failure was too strong. Susan also disappeared from our lives. She could never forgive me for the deception, as she called it. Marcus and Oliver, upon learning of their protégé's defeat, cut off all contact with him. It turned out their friendship was based solely on the expectation of future material benefits. A month after the trial, I ran into Daniel at a shopping mall. He looked older and tired. He was now working at a different car dealership, renting a small apartment on the outskirts of town. "How are you?" I asked out of politeness. "Fine," he replied dryly. "And you?" "Also fine." We stood in awkward silence, two people who were once close and had now become strangers. "Grace," he said suddenly, "I realize I was wrong. I let myself be deceived, believed the wrong people." "You realize that?" I was surprised. "Yes. After the trial, I rethought a lot. Those friends of mine, Marcus and Oliver, disappeared as soon as it became clear there would be no money. My mother also cooled towards me, constantly reproaching me for doing everything wrong. And now what? Nothing It's too late to change anything. You won't be able to forgive me, I understand that." He was right. Betrayal cannot be forgiven. It can be forgotten perhaps, but not forgiven. "Daniel, we are Ethan's parents. If you want to see your son, call." "Thanks," he said quietly. "Maybe someday." We parted ways. I never saw him again. 6 months passed. Ethan grew up a healthy and cheerful child. My business thrived. New major contracts came in. I hired a good nanny, set up a home office, and learned to combine motherhood and work. Sometimes in the evenings when my son was asleep, I would sit on the patio of our house and think about life, about how important it is to be able to understand people, about how foresight is not deceit but wisdom, and about how true love is not measured in money.